I want to move on now to, away from the health service and utilities, I want to move on to standard of living, housing and local business. We've got 3 questions in there. First one is, will you commit to supporting local businesses, home building and home ownership in the poorest constituencies in the UK? Who wants to go first with that?
Last bit?
I'll repeat the whole thing. Will you commit to supporting local businesses, home building and home ownership in the poorest constituencies in the UK? Who wants to go first on that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first on that. Short answer is yeah. We would. We think we desperately need to build more homes in this country, and that's why we've committed in our manifesto to 380,000 new homes per year for the lifetime of the next Parliament, of which 150,000 would be social homes. So there's a desperate need for homes, and there's a desperate need for social homes, but, and this is the key, they have to be the right homes in the right place with the right infrastructure. And that's where we would have a community-led approach. The Tories aren't here, so they're not here to defend themselves, but if you look up how major home building companies have donated to the Tory party, you will understand a bit of why we have now a developer-led approach. And we would say we'd totally invert that, and we would have a community-led approach. So we do think that homes are an engine of growth for communities, but they've got to be done in the right way with community assent and with that social infrastructure of doctors, surgeries, school places, bus routes, etc. And we've seen it. We've seen it happen well in parts of North London, and we've seen it happen badly. We've got to learn from where we've done it well.
How do you see that working? Because the planning process,
yeah,
when if it's developer-led, consults with all the stakeholders you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So how does what you're proposing vary from the current model?
Yeah, well, the number one thing is we'd staff the planning departments better. And so in our manifesto there's a specific line there about bolstering the capacity of planning departments and giving more resources in general to local councils, because you're right. Without them to facilitate these, it gets delayed for ages. So there are other changes to the planning law. We've committed to a use it or lose it scheme, so to stop developers buying land, hoarding it, waiting for the market to be in their favour and then building homes, instead of building homes when the communities need it. Another way we've talked about is using citizens' assemblies, so forums like this, but on a bigger scale, where we actually consult with people, where we actually listen to people, and we actually hear about where people think the homes and infrastructure should go. So there's a number of practical steps we can take.
Aadil, you want to go next?
No, I think largely Jonny's already covered what I was about to say. Community-led housing projects, more affordable housing, and of course there needs to be more streamlined planning processes as well for that. And that of course includes adequately staffing the planning commissions. But I think more concerned about the finer points, and I'm every one of you has spoken about general party points and what we can do nationally, but local to Brent, none of this has really worked to a T, has it? I mean, there has been some success projects, there has been some failures. I mean, if I was to ask you about any local failures, I assume you guys wouldn't be able to tell me, but I'll probably tell you. Lots. Okay, well, let me, I'll tell you a few, maybe. So there's several bottlenecks, not least in Wilsonby, where Clifton Way, where Park Avenue North, right? There's a massive bottleneck there. That's contribute towards increased traffic, and that's because permissions were given out to build high-rise blocks of apartments without doing a thorough impact assessment. Okay, there wasn't critical infrastructure. Was there an impact assessment done for more schooling, bus lanes, NHS services? So this all sounds great on paper, but when you're implementing it on a borough level, we need to ensure that traffic doesn't become something that is a nightmare for local constituents, and also at the same time there is infrastructure to promote obviously a more efficient fluid working system.
Thanks. James?
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to mine.
That's fine.
So you can get time to get out your email.
I've got my manifesto on the tablet.
Oh, okay.
No paper.
Yeah, so Aadil loves going on about being local and nothing works nationally and it wouldn't work locally, which I don't really understand. But anyway, here we are. Our policy is we need to look at mass building of social housing. We've committed to building 1 million more homes, but not in the green belt like Labour will do. We need it in metropolitan areas. This can be done by reappropriating old commercial buildings. There's an eyesore just over the road of an office building that has been empty for a long time. Why is that not being turned into social housing? That could be done so easily. Also, near where I'm from in Leeds, they've turned old industrial complexes into social housing and apartments. It's worked very well. these are the innovative ideas that we need to look at, not just building big brick tower blocks. We need to look at innovative methods of what they do in the Netherlands and Germany, where they use prefabricated eco-friendly homes that can be put up in half the time as it would take for a brick building, and it's more efficient, it's cheaper to build at a better cost to the council. Away from property-led development-led building, it should be brought back into the council, and it should be run efficiently on a state level, because it's the only way it will work. Otherwise, these things will be built for a profit, and you end up in the same situation that we're seeing now.
Martin?
Yeah, what's gone wrong? I mean, I don't know where things are with the St. Raphs redevelopment. The much promised originally rebuild of the estate, and then the funds were not available to do that, and so there was a plan for infill, I think 200 new houses along the outskirts of the estate facing the River Brent. I understand that the viability of that no longer exists and the whole thing has been delayed. Alongside that, there were supposed to be improvements on the estate for existing tenants. I can't see much evidence of that. I don't know if anybody here can point to any examples. I was involved in the very early stages of those proposals and publicised them on my blog, Wembley Matters. And there was quite a debate about them at the time, but everything has gone quiet, hasn't it?
But Ryan, what would the Green Party do to, enable that to happen?
Right. Well, much more community involvement in that, in any development, but also money set aside for development of fairer housing. Where I might disagree with the premise of the question, I think that's why I should repeat the end of it. The Green Party supports social housing, the building of more council housing. What we don't support is the right to buy existing council housing. We think that diminishes the housing stock, and that we need to retain and increase the amount of social housing. There's a whole question then of Brent's proposals about what affordable housing actually is. There's so many different ways to refer to affordable housing. One way is to say it's 80% of the market rent. That's not affordable to most people in Brent at all. Social housing, council housing should be around, to be fair to people, about 38% of market rates. At the moment, only some of it is at 50%, and it's very, very difficult for anybody to afford. With the developments that are happening in Brent,
just let you know, that's the next question, right? So, if you want to carry on, then I'll wait to use a minute for the next question, which you can have if you like, or you can have the next question. If you're tackling that already, then that is using slot wisely for that. You ran out your time. So what I'll do, I'll say the next question. I think you're on your way to answering that anyway. Right. So give you a benefit of actually addressing it. Okay. Many constituents feel there is a lack of affordable housing and overbuilding in the borough without adequate services to support the growing population. Will you commit to pushing for affordable housing and preventing new building projects going ahead without adequate consideration to services to support the increased number of residents? So I think you've gone along that way. So
yeah. Okay, shall I just read what it says in our manifesto? That might be useful.
If it's not longer than a minute, then
all right. Right. Our right homes, right place, right price charter, a bit like the Lib Dems, will simultaneously protect valuable green space for communities, reduce climate emissions, tackle fuel poverty, and provide genuinely affordable housing. Councils and national governments should be working together to deliver the homes people need, where they need them, and at rents and prices they can afford. Yet speculators and developers are currently allowed to chase the biggest profits and ignore local communities. Greens will support local councils to provide good quality affordable social housing in places where people live and work, and we will ensure large-scale developments are always supported by new infrastructure such as GP surgeries, bus services, cycling and walking networks and extra school places. I think that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. Who wants to go next? Put pressure on everybody to go next.
I'll go. Because actually, I think, look, what we've heard, I've already addressed some of these issues, I think, and to be honest, the four of us are pretty in broad agreement. More social housing, better community-led planning, and more social infrastructure. So what I would say, actually, is think about who's not here, right? Again, the Tories, at the national level, the failure on housing on a national scale has been horrendous. Labour, who've run the council for how many years? The failure at failure at local level has been horrendous. So the four of us are probably broadly aligned, and you've heard that, right? But think about who's actually got us in this mess in the first place. The Tories at the national level and Labour at local level across London.
It was Jonny, and I'm in broad agreement with, I think all of us would want to agree together. I want to add 2 points, and obviously one that I dwelled upon in my previous response, is there needs to be more community-led involvement. Consultation periods need to be longer. And this issue is exacerbated in Cricklewood, okay? And the reason why I keep bringing back local issues is because we are here in Brent, okay? If you look at the situation in Cricklewood borders Camden, Brent and Barnet, okay? The B&Q development, okay, they're going to be developing high-rise apartments in B&Q without putting any real consideration on the serious impact it will have and bottlenecks of local traffic, not least the requirement for parking. Parking is an issue for every local in Brent. This is going to be exacerbated with an extra high-rise block. Okay, Barnet pushed that through without consultation or pushback from other boroughs. So we need more enhanced diligence, and we need more community participation. And of course, in addition to that, we need more monitoring and accountability on a regular basis on impact assessments. That's my point.
James?
Yeah, the same, we're in agreement. We're not. It needs to be all community-led. All new development needs to be community-led. It needs to be taken out of the hands of property developers who have leached off local councils, local planning for too long. It needs to be brought back here, and it needs to be, all new development needs to be run through local government, through communities, to make sure that the housing is where it needs to be, to make sure that there are all the services around that are required for people to live a decent life, and to take away from extortionate social housing rents, which we are seeing because of private companies and through private housing associations. That has to be cut out completely, and we need to have that council-led, community-run, so we can get a decent deal for local people at decent prices, which we are not seeing. We have not seen for a long time.
Can I give you one example of something?
Can I do quick?
Which is
10 seconds.
Granville New Homes, South Kilburn, sold to Brent Council by the developer for £18 million. Brent Council discovered it was not fit to live in, had to move the people out, and has had to spend more than £18 million putting it right. That's the kind of problem that we have in Brent with the council somehow in the hands of the developers. And what's even more infuriating is that the same people who built that property were given more contracts to build by Brent Council.
I wonder why.
I'm going to go to the next one. Thank you, everybody. Brent is the fourth most deprived borough in London in respect of health inequalities, homelessness, rough sleeping, low pay, and with 3 of the wards in East Brent, Stonebridge, Harlesford and Dollishill among the poorest in the borough. The question is, what do you say should be done to address the economic, housing and health inequalities faced by East Brent residents? Now, the key part of the question is, what can you bring to the job to do that? Who wants to go first with that one?
Yeah, that's fine. So what we need to do is completely cut out corruption in Brent Council, which I think we are seeing and should be afraid to say it's rife. We need to go after that big time. What we also need to do, like we've been talking about, is making sure there is more social housing for the most vulnerable. The care is there, but we keep coming back to the key issue of funding. We need to make sure that all funding is managed properly, but the funding that is required is fulfilled. But that doesn't come from taxing the working class and the poorest. It comes from taking this from large corporations, the ones at Wembley Park that got a very good deal to be there and pay very little tax in return. These are the things we do need to look at that will help the poorest. And again, it's mismanagement and corruption, which is rife, and it's been rife for a long time.
Who wants to go next?
Yeah, happy to go. I mean, I think, look, we've talked about housing already, we've talked a bit about healthcare, so I think, again, you've heard our positions on that. What I would say
I think the key part of the job,
Yeah.
the question is, what can you do about it? Because remember,
yeah,
a lot of this is about local planning laws and
Yeah.
the council activities. You guys will be represented as MPs,
Yeah.
and your clout's very different from the local council, right?
Absolutely.
And it's about how can you impact the lives of the residents, of Brent,
Yeah.
to affect that change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at that then. So what can we do at a wider scale? So for me, there's a couple of things that we really need to do, not just in Brent but nationwide, and that's think about people's skills. That's thinking about people's the infrastructure that people have around them, and equality, income equality. So we know, we're probably all agreed that having huge wealth inequality drags on communities and drags on the overall economy. So I'm not going to go too much into that. We can talk about that if you like. But I want to talk a bit about skills and giving people the skills that they need to actually take ownership of their lives and build better communities and better opportunities for their families. So we're committing to a lifelong skills grant for every citizen, so they can use what they need, they feel that they would like to learn about, that will help them in their career, that will help them develop their self-worth and their own capacities, but also that will add to economic activity in our areas. So that's one thing. Another thing that the Liberal Democrats consistently put forward is more powers to local authorities. We've got to give local authorities the power to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And that's why we look at options for increasing federalism, devolving power to the lowest possible level, so that, let's again look at Labour and Tory. What are they doing? Everything is centrally controlled, with the Treasury vetting everything. We would have a bottom-up approach where local communities can understand what's best for their area, where people are empowered as individual citizens, as families, with the skills they need, and that is a way that we think we can grow the economy and we can give people a better shot at life.
Just say, what you're talking about there does reflect a lot what's happening in the industry.
Yeah.
So, in terms of businesses generally, they have a policy of creating agile working, where you're devolving decision making down to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
So it's not the exec and senior people making decisions, which are equivalent to a federated structure. Right?
Absolutely.
It's about devolving everything.
And I'll tell you just one more thing quickly, that we would hugely improve the economic opportunities across communities, and that is free childcare. At the moment, the average cost of childcare, many of you will know this, is £50,000 in London, right? So if you're a couple, and one of you is earning less than £50,000, it's cheaper for that person to stay at home, and that's usually women. And so we think if you can provide free or much reduced childcare costs, it gives the opportunity for more women to enter the workforce. That boosts the overall economic productivity, and it's much fairer in terms of gender equality. So that's a concrete thing.
Sorry, how will you fund that?
So we've got increasing capital gains tax on the millionaires and billionaires, increasing taxes, reversing the Conservative cuts to taxes on big banks, a digital service tax on global tech companies and social media companies, a windfall tax on the energy companies. I can go on, but if you look at the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the most respected economic think tank, you look at the three main parties, our manifesto, which is fully costed, is seen to benefit the poorest 20% of society, way more than Labour and massively more than the Conservatives. So that's
that was pretty much said in 2010. Pretty similar policies.
Yeah, we were in a coalition with the Tories, and we weren't able to.
Over a decade of austerity.
Yeah, exactly.
You implemented tuition fees, getting rid of that pledge of free tuition.
All parties. The Labour brought the tuition fees in, the Tories put tuition fees up. We were part of a coalition that had to take difficult decisions, and look, I wasn't part of that. I wish we didn't do it. I'd like to get back on it.
It was a key pledge.
Yeah, and we went back on it and we were punished by it. And now what we've learned is look at what we're offering now. We've learned these lessons from the hard yards put into government. Unlike the other parties, we know what it takes, and we know the challenges that this country actually faces, and we've got pragmatic solutions.
So are you for the abolition of tuition fees now?
What we're saying in our manifesto is we'd give maintenance grants, we'd return maintenance grants to the poorest students.
So that's a no.
Frankly, the universities can't afford it. No, it's
Well,
not a fair.
proper funding, they can.
So what we have now effectively is a graduate tax, which is actually a progressive tax, because graduates do earn more over the course of their working life. We think that's fair. We don't have the fiscal room right now after the Tory government of the last few years.
Well, with the way you want to tax, you don't.
Well, we're taxing the wealthiest to pay and
that
support
doesn't
the
pay
poor.
for enough.
All right, so I'm trying to bring you back to point, guys, because you're now deviating way off the question, right?
I think I might have forgotten the question.
Right, exactly, right. It's about what you.
I don't want to abide on it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll just wait for you to stutter and then I'll go into it, right? So basically it's all about the inequalities within people's lives within Brent, right? And it was about what you can do to address that, but also at a personal level, what you can bring to the job.
Yeah. Well,
in your case, your colleague.
I'm not up for the job, yeah. And my colleague is the CEO of a company, so she's got experience on managing companies and delivering. But I think the main thing is actually you. The answer lies with the ordinary people voting in elections and making a difference. So many people don't vote. I mean, I think Tokington Ward was 29%, 29 out of every 100 people who are on the voting register voted. If you don't vote, you can't blame anybody but yourself for what then happens. So that's the first thing. But what we see in Brent, council-wise and to some extent in terms of the MPs, is a widening gulf of what they're doing up there and what you need. So looking at Tokington and Stonebridge and so on, St Raphs, Brent Council closed Stonebridge Adventure Playground. Served the playground, one of the most deprived estates in Brent. The play workers on that estate were people who'd gone to the playground themselves as youngsters, were dedicated to improving the lives of those people, actually helped stop gang warfare and all sorts of things on the estate. It was actually closed down for developers. Bridge Park Centre, actually put together by black people on the Stonebridge estate, who went to the government to get funds for it and so on. That building that you talked about across the road, which is empty, that's part of a great big deal that Brent Council has made with a Grand Mediterranean Holdings. It's been lying there because Brent Council hasn't got round to doing the development. But also, they took away the Bridge Park Centre from the local community. So that kind of self-respect that people have for building something themselves for the community is then destroyed by the local council. And that does make everyone feel powerless, that there's nothing they can do. So it's actually the local community grabbing back power for themselves, voting in the elections, standing in the elections, and making a difference, and holding the council to account. I mean, that story I told you.
How would you achieve that as an MP with your colleague?
Well, we are for proportional representation, so that you wouldn't get a one-party council. You would get people elected to council on the proportion of the votes that their party had. So there will always be some councillors or some MPs nationally from minority parties. We in the Greens, when we get into the House of Commons, we've got about 4 MPs, we want to put pressure on the Labour Party if they're elected to actually be socialists and not Starmerites.
Right, I don't want to talk over you, but we've got to move on.